And we're live with JavaScript Air. Hello, everyone. We are super excited to be talking about progressive web apps today in this JavaScript broadcast podcast, JavaScript Air, that we love so much. Before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors that make this possible. We have Egghead.io, the show's premier sponsor. They have a huge library of bite-sized web development training videos. Check them out for content on JavaScript, Angular, React, Node, TypeScript, all kinds of awesome stuff. And upcoming really soon, a deep dive on Webpack that I'm working on right now. Really excited about it. And I'm using Webpack 2, which is the bomb. So then Front-End Masters is also sponsoring. It's a recorded, expert-led workshop with courses on advanced JavaScript, asynchronous, and functional JS, as well as lots of other great courses on front-end topics. And incidentally, I'm also doing a workshop for Front-End Masters in August, and one of my workshops will be Webpack Deep Dive. So if that's your jam, check that out. Then Track.js reports bugs in your JavaScript before customers notice them, and with their telemetry timeline, you'll have the context to actually fix them. Check them out and start tracking JavaScript errors today at trackjs.com. And Spark Post is email delivery built for developers. Build something awesome with their Node.js library or SMTP relay. Start sending 100,000 emails free with Spark Post at sparkpost.com/jsair. And finally, WebStorm. WebStorm is a powerful JavaScript IDE. It makes developers more productive with its super intelligent code assistance for JavaScript, Node, Angular, and React, and integration with lots of other different tools. Learn more at jetbrains.com/webstorm. Great, that's our sponsors. Let me just mention again that this is a live show, and so we have the benefit of interacting with you, the live viewers. So if you're interested in asking any questions of our guests about this topic, progressive web apps, you can tweet the hashtag JSAirQuestion and ask your questions there, and they will be answered. And then next week, our show is actually sort of in flux right now. It was going to be Webpack. We pushed that back a week, and we're probably going to be doing something about beginning, like the beginners in the JavaScript community. So should be an awesome show. I think it's valuable for us to care about people who are new in the community and in the industry. So check that out next week. It'll be the same time. And then follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+ to keep up with the latest. All right, let's get to know people who are on the show. So like I said, I'm Kenzie Dodds, your host, and then we have a couple subject matter experts in the area of progressive web apps. And so yeah, first Henrik Jorteg.
Hi.
I'm pretty sure that I pronounced your last name wrong.
No, you got it. It's good.
Okay. Okay. I didn't practice the name, so hopefully this works out. We also have Ada Rose Edwards.
Hi.
And Nolan Lawson.
Hello.
And Ben Kelly.
Hello.
Awesome. So let's give each one of our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves before we get into our topic. So we'll start with Henrik.
Hey, yeah, so I'm an independent JavaScript developer right now doing some contract work for a Fortune 500, building some fun stuff that might be related to the show. Yeah, I think the web needs to be doing what we're doing here with progressive web apps, and I'm really excited to see this come to be. So that's me.
Awesome. Ada.
Hi, I'm from the Financial Times on their in FT Labs, their research department. I'm a full stack JavaScript developer, and yeah, I've been talking about progressive web apps for a while now, and I've been working on web apps since I joined the Financial Times before service workers were a thing, so a long time. So yeah, that's that.
Awesome. I just want to say thank you, Financial Times, for polyfill.io. It's a fantastic service. And actually, it was picked on the show by Mishko Hevery a couple episodes ago. So yeah, Polyfill has been on the show before. It's super cool. All right, Nolan.
Hi, I'm Nolan Lawson. I'm a freelance web and mobile developer, and I do a lot of stuff. I'm one of the maintainers of a JavaScript library called CouchDB, open source JavaScript database. You may know me from a silly Pokemon app that I wrote that is a progressive web app, so I guess that makes me an expert on the subject, and I'm happy to be here.
And we're happy to have you. Ben.
Hi, my name's Ben Kelly. I work for Mozilla. I'm on the DOM team, mainly working on service workers for the last 2 years or so. Kind of have the, I don't know, misfortune of being a C++ developer. So I find myself often having to take an opinion on web stuff, even though I'm not a practitioner day to day. So fully aware that I have a lot to learn there, but try to help where I can. So hopefully I can offer something here.
Well, we appreciate your work on Service Worker, and I think that will be a major topic in our show, and maybe a little bit controversial. We'll find out. So, cool. Yeah, I think to just get started with our show, it's always good to get kind of a baseline for everybody's understanding, make sure we're all talking about the same thing. So, could I get somebody to give us like a 1 or 2 minute definition of progressive web app? Anybody can take that.
Sure, I will, if no one else will. A progressive web app is a website that's so good you wanted to install it to your home screen. Usually has offline support.
That's awesome. Huh?
It can do push notifications. It's got to be responsive. Yeah, you can add it to your home screen, which is one of the main things you get with an app. And it's got to be progressive, as in so that it will still work in IE7 as just a website, but if you're on in a recent browser, you can also install it to your home screen. Does that kind of encompass most of the things?
Yeah, I was actually, so I might have a misconception here, but is it possible, I thought that it was only possible to actually install and have an actual icon on the home screen on Android devices with Chrome. Is that not true? You can do that with like Apple and Safari?
Yes, you can add.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, Apple's done it for years.
Yeah, that's how they first started.
Yeah, obviously I'm not a subject matter expert on this.
Yeah, I think that's why Ada was very careful to not mention any particular technologies in her definition of a service work or there, right there.
Nice.
A progressive web app, because it's true. There's lots of different ways that you can make one.
Cool. Actually, Nolan, maybe this would be a good opportunity for you to talk about being duped a little bit by a certain progressive web app.
Yeah, I guess I can tell that story now. I might as well. Yeah. So I was so excited. I just got off the plane. I'm in New York, flew from Seattle, and I was so excited because I was excited to come on the show and to talk about my recent experience with a lovely progressive web app that I had from Alaskan Airlines, which allowed me to look up my boarding pass, and it worked totally offline. I could save it to my home screen. It had a splash screen. When it launched, it didn't have a URL bar, and I said to myself, this is a beautiful progressive web app, a perfect shining example of what a progressive web app can be used for, right? Like a boarding pass. Like I don't have to take a screenshot of this thing. I don't have to worry that I'm going to lose it when I'm standing in line and fumbling for my phone, right? But it turns out that I opened it up in the Chrome Inspector, the DevTools, and actually it was using application cache or app cache and touch icons and another special tag, mobile web app capable. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Which was a novelty. That was a new one for me. And those technologies have actually been around for several years, so they predate the term progressive web app even.
So I think just like Ada, carefully avoided any specific technologies in her definition. I think, even though Alaska Airlines wasn't actually a progressive web app in the terms of modern technologies, it still provided that kind of an experience, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about progressive web apps. Even though the technologies are maybe a little bit nicer these days or advanced in some ways, it doesn't have to use those technologies to be a progressive web app.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with that point.
I agree, yeah. The whole progressive aspect is, as Ada said, that it progresses from site to app, basically.
Cool. So let's talk about some of the more modern technologies that are used to accomplish this. So what are, or maybe let's let's dive a little bit deeper into the definition of progressive web app. What are the minimal things that are required, I guess, for you to consider an application progressive?
Well, I can give you kind of what the Google Chrome definition of that is, which is that you have an app manifest that you run, which is a JSON format for describing metadata about your application. You register a service worker, and your site runs on HTTPS. In addition, from what I understand, they're going to add additional kind of requirements in that it should serve something offline when you, so without network, it should still be rendering something. So that's kind of the modern definition in terms of that's what will make the add to home screen UI appear. That's part of the native browser UI for in the browsers that fully support progressive web apps.
Cool. So I would say the minimum required functionality. Again, I'm going to avoid using not for something to be considered a web app. But this is below what is required to actually bring up a prompt. I'd say it needs to be responsively designed so it works well on mobile and desktop. Otherwise, we're just going to have another generation of M-dot sites. It's got to have some kind of content when you're offline, and it's got to work well across touch platforms and mouse or pointer environments. And that's kind of like my minimum, what I would expect.
Go ahead, Nolan.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting point you brought up. You just mentioned the prompt, and I think maybe the panelists here, we all know what the prompt is, but maybe we should explain for the audience what she means by the prompt. Okay, so this goes back to the question of what is the definition of a progressive web app, and as it turns out, we don't have any representatives of Chrome here, but the Chrome team does have a very specific definition of what a progressive web app is in terms of whether or not they will show this magical prompt to you. And what this prompt is basically it's like a little toast that shows up at the bottom of the screen when you go to a website that qualifies as a progressive web app in their definition. And it says, do you want to add this site to your home screen? Which, actually, that's in Chrome right now. It's in Opera, both for Android. And then, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that's in Fennec. It's in Firefox for Android nightly now, right?
Actually, I'm not sure. We're working on our manifest support, but it's not, to my knowledge, shipping yet in any of our branches. The whole issue with the prompt, it's basically a browser-specific heuristic that has no standards around it. Like, there is no standard for progressive web app. Like, the underlying technologies are standardized, but this concept is not. And so should we standardize this heuristic or not, I guess, is an open question. It kind of ties browsers' hands if we do that. But anyway, long answer to a short question. So.
No, that's a good answer. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say some of the heuristics for it aren't they aren't matched across browsers. They're down to what the browser thinks a progressive web app should be, and those views don't necessarily align. But I think that's actually kind of a good thing that progressive web apps themselves aren't a spec. They're just a way of building something.
Well, so this might be. This kind of gets into, sometimes I get confused by the term progressive web app because in my mind I hear progressive and I think this site works progressively, it gets more features depending on what platform it's on. If it's on a site with service worker, maybe it works offline. If it's on a browser with service worker, if it's on a browser without service worker, maybe it doesn't work offline, but it sort of progressively enhances across feature sets. But that's actually not the definition. I guess progressive web app is more as you, over time, use it, it progressively gets more app-like. And so there are a number of progressive web apps that are sort of, I only work on Chrome, even though, mainly because they haven't been, for various reasons, like if you don't have the exact set of features that are in this definition for the heuristic. And internally, I'm like, that doesn't feel progressive to me. But I think that's the problem is there's this one browser definition that's being sort of defined very firmly, and they're the first ones with implementations that I'm not complaining about that, but I think it'd be great if we could come to a cross-browser solution so things work progressively across the platforms as instead of tying it to the new largest market share browser. Sorry, kind of rambling there.
No, I think it's interesting, but I tend to think that we should be actually holding the bar pretty darn high for that prompt, because I think the web has a reliability problem in general. It's Apple, kind of originally said to everybody, hey, developers, if you want to build for iOS, you should, add this web app capable tag, and then we'll make a way for you to add an icon. But the problem was the web wasn't ready for that in terms of capabilities, and so everyone knew that it was just a bookmark, right? No one thought that they were installing an app. But as a result, you push that bookmark and you don't know whether it's going to open or not. And I think that's exactly the problem here, is we don't have a way to have people fully depend on the experience of the web. And then when I add something to my home screen, I want that thing to freaking work as if it's a native app, whether or not, I explained this to somebody who wasn't, overly technical, and then the thought of adding something to their home screen was not appealing to them, because they're like, well, that's where I've got all my pure native apps that I know are going to work. Why would I want to add a bookmark to that? And I think, it's just I think it's important that this is for the first time something the web can do to actually be a fully native feeling, OS treats it as a first-class citizen type thing. And I think if we don't hold the bar to that, to the add to home screen thing, I think we lose a lot, because we have no other mechanism of controlling, kind of quality of these things other than, so what? Every app registers a service worker and tries to get you to install it to the home screen. What? That doesn't gain you anything, I think it's really important that in addition to having service worker and stuff, that it actually run some tests to make sure that this thing will open when it's offline, etc. And I feel like that's an important detail in all of this, that we risk diluting the value of the whole thing by not holding that bar a little higher.
So you were just saying that that it's only recently we can now do fully offline apps, and I
misspoke.
Yeah, I slightly disagree.
But please clarify.
Because again, I'm kind of shilling for my company here, but the Financial Times has been using a progressive web app as its main distribution of digital content on mobile via a progressive web app since 2012, and this was before service workers and the App Cache manifest, and this was but we weren't just shipping for iOS, we were also deploying this to Android via a wrapper, and Firefox OS and RIP, and BlackBerry and Windows. So it's definitely something that's not a new thing to do, and I think I think because it does have some history behind it, I think it's a pretty safe technology to go into, and I'm worried because it's only recently entered into the limelight that a lot of companies are going to be concerned that it's new and untested when it's actually a quite robust technology. Well, it's a robust delivery mechanism, even if the technology has changed over the past few years.
So really, the fact that you can build reliable web apps is not new, is what you're saying. I mean, which part of it is robust, is what I'm asking. You said that's what you're getting at, right?
Yeah, it works. You can deliver content through it. It drives revenue. It's a good technology.
Absolutely. What about the offline aspect of that? How important is that to all of it?
For us as a news delivery company, I couldn't think of the correct term there. Offline was pretty important for us, so we used App Cache at the time to gain offline support. Unfortunately, App Cache does encourage some very bad habits with regards to mangling URLs in order to maintain the single page web app kind of experience, which has been resolved if you can use a service worker. And although a service worker will eject an app cache if you have both, you can't really. If you have app cache, you have to contort yourself into this horrible way of developing, which you don't need to do with a service worker. So definitely, I'd say if you're going to build an app now, build a service worker app. Don't use app cache. But there are tools out there which will allow you to convert a app cache-based website into a service worker one, such as I think it's like SW-app cache or something from the service worker tools which Google have been putting out there. So I don't really know where that went, but yeah, there were some words.
Yeah. So to Ada's point, just to let the audience in on some of the details of this stuff. So app cache has been around since, what, 2007, 2009 in broad browser support, and basically allows you to define a declarative manifest of all the files that you want to cache, and it just caches them. And it's very coarse, and it's very difficult to work with. And there's a famous article from Jake Archibald about this API that I cannot repeat on air because I think it violates the code of conduct, just the title itself. But we can provide a link afterwards. But it basically sums it up. It's really difficult to work with. I've struggled with app cache many times. We used it for the PouchDB website, I remember. And we thought, okay, we make an offline database for JavaScript. We know how this stuff works. We can figure this out. But if you go back, we had I think there's 7 issues that we ended up opening on ourselves over the course of weeks and weeks as we realized that we had messed this up so badly. I mean, migrating from HTTP to HTTPS, we almost put it in a situation where the site was locked down for forever. And if someone visited the site twice, they would never ever see new content again unless they blew away their browser history. So it's definitely full of foot guns, whereas Service Worker is a lot more flexible and allows you to basically build your own app cache, which is really nice. But on top of that, Ade is totally right. There's been ways to add things to the home screen since 2009-ish, touch icons. Touch icons are what allow you to add shortcuts to the home screen of both iOS and Android. I mean, we've had IndexedDB since 2009, WebSQL since 2007, local storage since about the same time. But I think what's genuinely new with progressive web apps, and I think one of the core reasons that everyone's really excited about them now is this prompt. I mean, that is the one thing that is really genuinely new and genuinely very interesting, and especially when you show it to your boss, it's a very good way to convince them that, hey, maybe progressive web app is the kind of thing we should invest in, because it's the browser promoting your app for you on its behalf, which is kind of amazing.
I just wanted to touch on that, the foot gun stuff that you were talking about. I actually did put an app into a situation with app cache where nobody could ever get updates again. Luckily, it was just like a little toy project, but so it wasn't that big of a deal. But I realized, you really got to be careful with this technology, because you can, you do something like that to the Financial Times, and you're in you're in a big bad situation.
We had hacks upon hacks upon hacks to minimize the amount of content that actually touches app cache. We had a tiny bootstrap which just to get us going, and then everything else was pulled out of IndexedDB and local storage. Just because, if you broke app cache, we would break the FT on our biggest platform.
I would also raise that you can, in fact, do the exact same thing with Service Worker. I have done this in development, fortunately not on anything of significance. But basically, if you push some bad JavaScript that breaks before you register the new Service Worker, you can put yourself in the exact same position, because it will keep serving from the old Service Worker and doesn't know that there's a new one. And since it's cache first, you're back in that spot. So it is worth at least kind of being aware that you can do this.
Hey, that can actually have benefits. I remember there was a talk from Substack where he kind of evangelized these things. He called them hyperboot apps. This idea of an app that can be forever locked down, and so it's 100% secure, because the first time you visit this site, that is exactly the same version of the site that it will be forever. So if that's what you want, you can do that.
As long as you don't care about, pushing updates ever, I guess it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing with the service worker, though, is that the browser will check for updates to your service worker JavaScript file, and if it detects a byte difference, it will pull down and update the new service worker.
Yes.
So if you wanted
but if you didn't
to
ever, well, my point is, if the JavaScript breaks before it even tries to register the new one, in my experience, that check doesn't happen.
It should. That's a bug if it doesn't.
Okay. All right. I will make sure that that's been fixed then.
There was a bug in Firefox until 46.01 that had that issue, but
Okay.
we pushed a patch release to fix that.
Okay. So what's the heuristic then for determining what? I mean, should it check the service worker anytime it's online to try to see?
It's whenever the browser attempts to fire an event at the service worker, it will if it's a navigation, like you're navigating to the window and it's a navigation fetch event, it will try to go to the network and hit the service worker. It may hit your HTTP cache, but if it's been over 24 hours, it will bypass the HTTP cache and go out to your server. So
maybe it's the 24-hour thing that got me. So it would have maybe resolved itself in 24 hours. Regardless, I wouldn't want to brick a site for 24 hours if it has any amount of traffic.
I think a common tip is just in general put no cache control headers on your service worker script so that you can always update as soon as possible.
I'm gonna have to look again to see what I was doing because something definitely went weird there. But
I opened a spec issue like maybe we should just do this if this is our recommendation. Just always just bypass cache, but that currently it's not the spec. I'm sorry, Ada.
So there is actually a very interesting post by Jake Archibald about what you should do with your cache to make updating easy in with service workers. I will find it and drop a link. I think I can do that somewhere. And essentially put the hash in the file name and set some cache headers, which I've forgotten. Yeah, it's very good, very useful, worth looking up. I'll go find it.
Cool, thanks. So I think we're getting a lot of questions on Twitter, so we'll probably only chat for another 10 minutes. But if anybody watching live does have questions, keep asking questions on Twitter. I'll make sure to give us enough time to answer. So I wanted to actually ask what does a progressive web app mean for the desktop? We talk a lot about mobile and that cool toast that pops up, saying, hey, or the prompt, would you like to install this on your screen? Like, that's not really a thing for desktop, right? There's no, like add this to your home screen, right? Or is that coming?
That is coming at least to Chrome. There is a add to shelf, they call it, and you can turn that on as a flag right now.
Yeah, so it's actually on it. Yeah, it's on Linux too. You can go add to home screen, and I was going to share my screen, but then I realized a lot of people can actually see it. But you could go. All right, yeah.
Yeah, you can show it, and if somebody wants to see it, who's listening, they can check out. We're at around minute 30, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So go more tools, add to desktop. It's on Linux, and yeah, it appears in your bar, and you get a web app. It works quite nicely.
Very cool. Thanks for the quick demo.
I wish I could say whether or not Firefox is working on that, but I'm kind of disconnected from the product UX side, so I'm not familiar with our plans there. I think we had something like that in the past, but it was like a different mechanism, so I'm not sure where we stand currently.
I'm actually not actually sure what the status is in Chrome either, actually, because I've heard some stuff about it being removed, but it's always been present. And this is a pretty recent version of Chrome in my browser, so I'm hoping it's either coming back or maybe it just hasn't been removed yet. But yeah.
Last I heard from the Chrome team, I may be misspeaking, is that they're working on harmonizing their treatment of progressive web apps and Chrome apps, which I think is kind of the similar story with Firefox and Firefox OS. Like Firefox OS apps are similar but not exactly the same as progressive web apps, and so they kind of need to be harmonized. But I actually tried, for what it's worth, I tried the Chrome thing behind the thing that's behind a flag. It was really nice. I could type into Spotlight on Mac and actually get auto suggestions for a progressive web app. It had its own icon and everything. It was quite neat.
Yeah, I think until this stuff, we didn't really have that much of a standard around how to go about any of this stuff, which is why we had Chrome apps and why we had Firefox OS apps. And I think now it just kind of makes sense to start unifying all these things under the same set of technologies, and then let the platform kind of pick exactly how to implement that for their users. But to me, like, this is, now that this is getting some attention and becoming more and more standardized, I think it's inevitable that this is the way to do this kind of thing, and then hopefully everything will support it eventually.
So I take that you're suggesting we just use the platform, right? Just kidding. That was we could talk about that later. So that had to come in. So I do want to get actually a little bit more technical before we go to our Twitter questions. Because we have Ben here especially, I'd really like to talk about Service Worker, that technology. Maybe Ben, you can give us an overview of how that technology works and what role it plays in progressive web apps.
Okay. That just reminds me of there's an infographic, a tall infographic that was going around recently about this. Let me see if I can summarize this. Essentially, a service worker is like a web worker. In the past, web workers were associated with a window, a document that opened them. A service worker is unique in that it can run without any window open. And this lets us provide a way to run JavaScript for a variety of different use cases. The main one is when a network request happens, you get a fetch event, and you can decide to create your own response. You can go to the network, you can go to a storage system like the Cache API or IndexedDB and get a result. And it really lets you build your own app cache functionality, or something completely different, like on The Guardian, I believe, like they provide a crossword puzzle if you're offline, instead of going to the site that you were trying to see. However, it also lets us provide a place to fire other events where you may not have a window, like a push event comes in but the window's not open. In the past, there was no way to run any JavaScript without the window open as a security mechanism. So now we have a way to do that. And in the future, background sync. I don't think there's anything spec'd yet, but some sort of geofencing, geolocation type API. Obviously, some security or privacy concerns around that. But that's sort of the goal, right? Is provide a background process or a thread that can run JavaScript and allow the site to build its own logic and functionality that used to be solely the domain of the browser, so that we can expose these primitives to sites.
Yeah, right now it's limited to those two use cases, right? The push notification support, and the Chrome has implemented background sync as well. Those are really the only two offline, or sort of everything's closed events that are going to occur for your service worker, right? Eventually, I would hope you'd be able to do sensors and other things, obviously with user permission, but those are the only two I'm aware of right now.
Right.
Something which is quite fun for generating content is that with the new Green Canvas API, you can dynamically generate the push notification icons, which I think is pretty neat.
That's awesome.
Wow. For those artists in the room, I am not one, but you can use that Canvas API and make some pretty amazing things. Cool. So I think that's helpful. So Service Worker is one of the technologies that help us build PWAs, or progressive web apps. Nolan, I know you wanted to talk about the web app manifest as well. That's another critical piece of this.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to quickly go over that. So if you've built Firefox OS apps before, it's going to look very suspiciously familiar. Basically, it's a JSON file where you define a name for the application. You can define a short name as well, so that it has a different name when it's on the home screen versus when it's open. You can define icons in various sizes. You can define a theme color and a background color for when it shows a splash screen when it starts up. Because maybe you want to, kind of give the impression of loading a little bit quicker. So kind of, psychologically, it's nice if you already have that whatever background color your app is going to start to show kind of in that splash screen. And then it also lets you define whether you want to launch with or without the URL bar, so whether you kind of want the browser Chrome around it, or whether you, or around the app, or if you wanted to kind of launch in standalone mode.
Orientation as well, right? Portrait versus landscape?
Yes, that's true. And you can also define a custom start HTML page, which is really nice because then you can say, like you can put like a query parameter in there, and that's how you know that it's starting from standalone mode, starting from the home screen, versus starting from the browser.
Cool. So we're really running down on our time, and we have lots of questions to ask. So I'm just gonna stop us on the web app manifest. It's cool, and it's really easy. So I wanted to get into a couple examples, and then I wanted to talk about some use cases that are really hard to accomplish with the technology we have, and maybe some things that are coming that will simplify those use cases a little bit. So first, some examples. I'll just give a quick example. JavaScriptAir.com is a progressive web app. Actually, the service worker I think is broken right now, but you can go to JavaScriptAir.com, turn your phone on airplane mode, and refresh, and you'll still get JavaScriptAir.com. Everything looks great. But if you go to one of the episode pages, I think the CSS is broken or something like that. But so if anybody here wants to help me fix that, that'd be great. It's open source. So, but what are some other really cool examples and like that you've seen of progressive web apps?
I think Flipkart was one of the first ones to do a big one. I think in terms of like broad audience. They have quite a few customers. They're a very large retailer from India. So they have a very awesome example of a progressive web app.
I feel compelled just to mention, I think what they built was great, and I'm glad to see them back on the web. Just going back to my previous statement, I don't think it's useful to have user agent checks, though, just because you don't have an exact set of features.
I agree.
So I want to give them praise, but I don't want people to duplicate the user agent checking.
They also, they're at least now doing iOS as well, which is good, which they weren't doing initially. But yeah, I was a little disappointed by that too.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I think there's a little bit of background that we could use there.
From what I understand, they used to have a website, then they went to pure native, and they came back to the web with this progressive web app. However, it was specifically targeted at a particular version of mobile Chrome. Like even if you open Chrome on a tablet, it didn't show. You'd get shunted off to the Play Store. And that's just where I have some cognitive dissonance hearing this is a great progressive web app, but if I open it in Firefox for Android, I get the Play Store without, so I know they're working on it. I know they have a business decision to make. I know that I'm not their target customer. It's just I would like to see the power of the web, right, is reach, and so allowing your site to work, even if it's not 100% the ideal feature set you want across multiple browsers, I think is the best thing. But I think there's studies that show that gives you better conversion than a interstitial to a Play Store or any store, and also I think it's better for the web in general.
Yeah, I want to just really quickly echo Ben's concerns because I think I also saw Twitter's mobile site, which is a great mobile site, but I believe they kind of made the same choice, if I recall. I think they finally went back on, and you can actually access mobile.twitter.com from Firefox now. But for a time, they were doing user agent checking.
Yes, and there was like they actually had a specific issue with their HTTP2 server that. Our HTTP2 server stack, client stack interacted poorly with their server. That was fixed. So it was a temporary situation, and it was more that it was completely broken for something that they were working to fix. I understand that sort of thing, but it's been Flipkart. I think the CSS would work just fine in Firefox. I think.
Yeah. I think to some degree though, like I'm fairly tolerant of that when they first launch. I mean I understand they have as long as they iterate towards that, like I feel like it's kind of okay. because it was better than what they had, which was nothing, like full-on door slam. So I guess I can give them, I don't know, I give them a little bit of grace and leeway there in that I don't, giving it a little bit of time, knowing what it's like to work in these large corporations, sometimes getting approval from various, organizations and getting it through QA or whatever might be challenging. They might have to make some cuts to kind of get it to go.
Yeah, and I think in terms of health of the web too, to add on to that, like one of the progressive aspects of building progressive web apps, I think, like I hear a lot from people when I mention this. Oh, but does it work in Edge? Oh, but does it work in iOS? And that's kind of the point, is that it doesn't work in those things, because the idea is you build this app that gracefully falls back to just a normal website, a perfectly fine website, and then you give those other browsers who have not implemented it yet, you give them incentive, right, to match that experience that people can get on other browsers. Like if you just do a user agent check and you only give that experience to Chrome, then what motivation do the Edge team or WebKit team have to actually work on it? Like, no, you're absolutely right. For the overall future health of the web, this is like one of those good web citizenship things we should be doing, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely think though, like you should still give users an awesome experience. Like, that I think that goes without saying, but I said it anyway. So cool. So what are some of the use cases that are common for progressive web apps, or not, maybe not common because they're hard? So what are some use cases that you can't really accomplish that you'd really think you'd want to with progressive web apps?
So one of the main ones that I'm aware of actually is podcast player, ironically, being on a podcast, in that traditionally podcast players, the media tends to be on some CDN in order to reduce bandwidth costs. However, because it's mainly been native apps in the past, those are just served over HTTP without CORS headers. In order for service worker and websites to use it effectively, if you access these without CORS, you get a change in the UX that says this site's using mixed content, and that makes your site look dangerous. So there's this sort of industry, chicken and the egg problem where we would like to get podcasts to serve CORS headers on all their media content, but they have no incentive to until there's web players. And so it's like, how do you bootstrap this problem without sacrificing the protection, the security that the web brings?
So the fetch API should, I think, will allow you to fetch with and be able to pull down a request without having the cross-origin resource stuff. So if you but you obviously can't do anything. You can't mangle it with JavaScript or anything like that. But you can cache it, and I think that might work in a inside an audio tag. Because I remember I've been doing 360 video viewing in a web app recently, and I was having some issues with the range header, but like it was working with CORS and stuff like that. So yeah. It's
yeah, I think you get the media content out, but from what Paul Lewis wrote a blog post about this, and what at least the experience on some browsers is you get a change in the user, like there's like a lock icon that says this is secure, or you get something that says this is mixed content, warning, and because you have when you're using a service worker, you're on a HTTPS site, and you're going to a no-CORS site. I think some browsers basically make a warning out of that.
Oh, and because it's HTTP as well, that was the issue. Sorry, I was focusing on that.
Yeah, I think I might have been confused, but yeah, maybe it's more of an HTTP versus HTTPS issue there.
Yeah, you could put it in an audio tag, that's fine, but you couldn't do something like, say, save it to IndexedDB, which is unfortunate because that's kind of one of the fundamental things you'd want to do with a podcast app, is be able to download your podcasts and then play them offline. If you can't do that, it's kind of like, what's the point?
You can put them in the cache API.
I've done that with images and stuff that are not HTTPS. So.
You can put them in the cache API, but because they're opaque responses, you have no idea if they're actually there or not. You could have just cached a 501, which is suboptimal. I mean, site thinks it's there, but try to listen to it and nothing happens.
Yeah, that it seems like this is like there's opportunity for improvement on this particular use case of the podcast, which makes me sad because I'd love to have my podcast just be like full on web app, but what do you do? Is there anything else that the current tools? Oh, sorry, Ada, did you have something else?
Yeah, I was going to say there's one more use case which I've seen, or two more use cases which I've seen brought up when I'm speaking to people at conferences about why they're not building a progressive web app. One is payments. They want to do payments through native, but for various reasons, and I think hopefully that should be sorted soon with the Web Payments API. And the other thing I've seen mentioned is not as granular control over the camera for people wanting to do camera apps. So yeah, and that one there's no APIs coming for that yet. So yeah, there were just a couple.
Yeah, so the web has a little ways to go yet, I think, to like be able to compete fully with native experiences on many use cases. Somebody on Twitter just asked maybe we should explain a little bit about the Cache API. Does anybody want to talk about the Cache API? What role that plays in progressive web apps?
I'm happy to take that up as kind of one of the browser storage people. So the web has many ways of storing data. We had cookies, and then we had local storage, and then we had WebSQL, and then we had IndexedDB. And now, for better or for worse, with service workers and associated specs, we are blessed with a new one, which is the Cache API, which is actually available. It's actually available both in the main thread and in the service worker.
Yep.
You can find it as window.caches, I believe, on the main thread. But basically, I joke, but it's actually really nice because it's optimized for caching requests. So it integrates really nicely with the Fetch API. Like it's kind of a part of that whole like family of standards that Ben can talk about. But basically, what it allows you to do is it allows you to just cache HTTP requests, cache exactly what the headers were, what the response was. Yeah, it's a fundamental part of doing service worker stuff. If you're not using cache within a service worker, you're probably not using service worker to its fullest potential.
The other thing of interest potentially is you can very easily write a little wrapper around it to just use it like a local storage, like promise-based alternative, which I may or may not have done.
Let's get a link to that.
I don't have a GitHub project on that yet because I'm not sure it's a good idea. So.
I actually saw something really interesting with that, with using actually this is using Fetch rather than the Cache API, but if you have it stored in the cache, you can, instead of local storage, it will work as well in asynchronously decoding JSON. So although it's like a little bit slower from making the decode to actually getting a result, it doesn't block the main thread, which is fantastic if you're decoding 15 megabytes of JSON or something. Not that you should ever be decoding 15 megabytes of JSON.
I remember reading about that blog post, and that might be something you'd want to test in different browsers because it does have an async step to it. However, once it's all loaded into memory, it really does need the JavaScript global that's on the main thread. So there probably is still a fairly large blocking step with that, unfortunately. But that's one of those. It's hard to perform that off the main thread because you need to create JavaScript objects. But yes, web workers, yeah, we'll see. It's complicated though, and it's one of those things where the API makes you think it's doing something more magical than it might be. But.
There's an awful lot of complicated things we can do these days with web workers and service workers combined. It's kind of interesting to cache your web worker code with service worker. It's just one of these moments when you're like, okay, this is getting pretty deep, but it totally works, and you can build amazing apps. So you should definitely read Nolan's kind of breakdown of what he did for Pokedex. I added that as one of my links because he didn't, so I figured I'd kind of toot his horn for him because I think it's awesome. I also gave a talk similar in content at .js in Paris. That's online too if you want to find that.
Very cool. Yeah, let's add that one to the links too. Cool. Yeah, we should probably jump into our questions on Twitter because we've got plenty of them. So unless there was anything else that anyone desperately wanted to make sure we bring up. Okay. Cool. So our first question is from actually the very first question is from my good friend Mike Hardington, and he asks, when do you think we'll be able to just say web apps instead of progressive web apps? When will we be able to just call them web apps?
I hope this happens. I hope this happens sooner than later. Dion Allmeyer said something about this. I tweeted something similar the other day, and he said, we used to call it color TV to delineate what a color TV is versus a regular TV. These days, obviously, it's just the TV, right? And I think until now, we've lacked enough definition, I think, around this to really be able to make that delineation. I realize this is like a very, I don't know, complicated topic. A lot of people have strong opinions on this, but I feel like what we should work towards is the user's perception of what an app is, which is that I can install it, I can run it from my home screen, and I think that makes sense to like have that be a web app and have everything else be a website. But that's just me. Cool.
All right. So Jeff Welpley asks, do you think that PWAs will reach a point where some big consumer-based companies won't need native apps?
We don't.
So.
Yes.
Easy question to answer. Yes, one day we will reach that point. Cool. Jeff Welpley also asks, here comes the use the platform reference. So what was the big deal with the post-Google I.O. discussion about use the platform? Anybody wants to take that? Nobody wants to take that. Yeah, I think the platform is really awesome. Abstractions are important. Okay, Yuri is asking when PWA, we have progressive web apps, then we also have hybrid, we have native. Where is a clear line between all of these?
So I've seen, oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I've seen, I've seen some companies start to move in a progressive, this is from speaking to people rather than actually seeing it myself, and they're saying they're moving in a progressive web app direction by first turning all of their wrapped content and improving it so that it's a decent app when wrapped, and then they're slowly planning to basically remove the wrapper and make it available to get straight via the web. Once they have no longer any native components.
So it sounds like it's a progression. Like you can start, if you have a native app, you can like slowly move to hybrid and then progressive.
Yeah, and Mike Hardington, who was just on, he does Ionic, right? And Ionic recently added progressive web apps as a build target. So for them, it's just another build target, right? You can build your app in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then you can build for iOS, build for Android, in a wrapper each one, or build for the web as a progressive web app. I don't know if that's actually shipped yet, but they did declare that they were gonna support that at some point.
Cool. So Juan is asking, I lost it. What do you think is holding people back from writing PWAs most? Lack of education, resilience on frameworks, or reliance on frameworks? What's holding PWAs back, or people writing them?
The lack of a bunch of big shipped examples.
Like I've been asking around here, and so for some people it is features such as web payments not being widely supported. Some people it's they want to get the offline support on iOS without relying on app cache. And for some people it's just momentum, and others they're like, yeah, we're doing it, but it's going to take time. But there definitely does seem to be a movement in that direction because it definitely gives you significant benefits with regards to click-through rate and actually getting people like installing, that was in air quotes, your app.
Of potential interest too, there is a PhoneGap/Cordova plugin for basically implementing Service Worker, so that if you could potentially write your progressive web app, ship it like that for platforms that support it, and then on iOS, take the exact app and just wrap it with that very minimal wrapper in that case to get the missing features. I don't know how good it is. I haven't used it myself, but it does exist.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Let's get that in the links. We've got a lot of links today. This is really great. Okay, great. So next question from Larry King. My experience, users resist mobile browsers. They just think apps. We need more than performance to win them over. Thoughts? And then Yuri jumps on top of that and also adds another point. I often hear what I often hear is on searchability, like we want people to be able to find the app in the App Store. So what are your thoughts on those things, like users' resistance to use like mobile browsers, and they just kind of want to use apps, and then the searchability aspect as well?
So if you're not in the top 0.1% of apps in the App Store, you're not getting visibility via the App Store. Users are going to be coming to you via the web, either via social media or via just looking for your website, and you expose it via your website, and it's gonna, it's definitely worth it to like, the App Store isn't, unless you're Angry Birds, you're not getting anything from the App Store.
I definitely want to agree with that. In addition, I think right now I think we have a little bit of an issue with users in that I think add to home screen just isn't strong enough. I've heard people react to that saying, why would I want to do that? As I mentioned before, I think we need the verbiage to change to install this app because that's how users perceive these things. I understand there's political challenges with that, with platforms that may not want that language. But I'm of the opinion until we get that point, we're not going to get quite the traction that we want out of this because it's just too weak.
I'd love to see like web search engines though, like maybe add a flag or something that says this conform, this site happens to have a manifest, you know, like something that says this is an appy link, and if you click here, it's something that you can install, and maybe allow people to search for those. On the other hand, I hear a lot of people saying that they want a curated list. However, we have URLs. Anyone can make a curated list. I think that's sort of the power of the web, is now that they're addressable through a URL. We don't have to necessarily have a store as the gatekeeper. But
I remember there was, I can't remember who it was, but someone mentioned earlier that perhaps the browser's heuristics should determine whether the app actually gives you content whilst it is offline. And I think rather than actually relying on the browser to do that, perhaps that's the kind of thing which big search engines beginning with G could use as part of their SEO heuristics. I know that usually gets stuff going quite well.
I may or may not have tweeted at Matt Cutts about that at one point. I definitely think they should do it.
They've got a lot of power, and I think they need to be really responsible and considerate about that power. Yeah, very interesting stuff. Cool. So that is our questions from Twitter. I think we should rush into our tips and picks. And due to limited time, we'll quickly go through these, and then we can wrap up the show. So I'll go ahead and go first, and then we'll go through our guests. So my tip for this week is avoid nesting your tests. So if you use something like Mocha or Jasmine, you have these describe blocks, so you can nest those describe blocks. I say have a single describe block, don't nest those, and avoid before each. I have a little podcast, like a 3-minute podcast that I recorded this morning about it, and you can see that in the links. For my pick, I was asked to pick this, and it looks really interesting. Vaadin, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but Vaadin Progressive Web App Competition. looks really interesting. You build a progressive web app and you win stuff, and it's fun. So check that out. Nolan Lawson, why don't you go next?
Okay, so for my tips, I basically got 2 tips from what's new in Chrome. So Chrome Canary now has an application tab if you build a progressive web app, which breaks down everything you want to know, so you can debug, what the icons are, how it launches, and then it also contains storage. And then my favorite feature that's absolutely going to revolutionize my own personal workflow is that there's now a single button where you can just blow away all of the offline data for a website, which is amazing. I've been using browser extensions for that, and it's been awful. Now there's actually something built in to just blow it all away and start fresh.
Sweet. Did you want to mention your pick?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I have one pick, non-programming thing, which is this documentary I saw recently. It's really, really good. It's a famous one. I guess maybe I was the last person on the planet not to see it. But it's called Hoop Dreams. It's a 1994 documentary about inner city kids in Chicago who it's kind of heartbreaking, but also really inspiring because basically they're really passionate about basketball and they sort of see basketball as being like their ticket out of poverty. But it's really, really worth watching. Very good documentary.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Henrik, let's hear your tips and picks.
Let's see. A few different things here, but I just randomly I really like GraphQL. I think we're going to see some really interesting things happening with GraphQL over the next few years, just because it's a nice clean spec, a really amazing way to query for application data, which we're all doing now. And Ref doesn't quite fit that pattern anymore. Also, a random other thing, I'm a huge fan of this library called Reselect that I've been using a lot recently for Redux applications, for just kind of grabbing, basically being able to ask intelligent questions of your application state. Just a few other things in there. Specifically, so one link I'll point out is just the SW Toolbox is a great set of tools that the Chrome team has released. That is a script that you can kind of import into your service worker that gives you like nice higher level abstractions for some of these things, because writing raw service workers can be a bit intimidating at first. So that's a good place to start if you're a little bit gun shy.
I know that my service worker for JavaScriptAir.com is copy paste.
But that said, I mean, I think it is worth learning and kind of battling through it. But there's a lot of power in that toolbox.
Very cool. Yeah, I should probably give a shout out to Jake Archibald. I copied his example, and it works most of the time. So
I did too.
Nice, cool. Yeah, I think abstractions are valuable, and it'd be really nice to get a good one for like common use cases for service workers.
Related to Webpack, also real quick method that's out there, using build tools like Webpack that are aware of all your assets are really useful for generating service workers.
Sweet. Yeah, and actually, just random other thing that has the word worker in it. Webpack actually can, I think they have a deploy or a packager for web worker. So like your target can be web worker, which is kind of like what? So okay, cool. Yeah, Ben, we'll have you go next.
Sure. I think the main tip I have is that I'd really, when you're writing a service worker, I'd really focus on if you're doing any asynchronous work outside of like your respond with, and make sure it's in a wait until. I see lots of code examples on the web, in guides and articles and in people's applications where they are not doing a wait until, and the browser can just kill your worker while you're doing that. In testing, you often won't see that happen because, for example, on Chrome, when you have the dev tools open, it will not kill your worker. It keeps it open so it can debug it. So this is a thing where like it can work perfectly in your development and then die in the world in like a Heisenbug sort of situation. So I would, like, I would double check your service workers about that. And then I was thinking about, I'm not very good at picking things, but I was thinking about this. I do think there's a really cool progressive web app called SoundSlice. I really think it's a great site that uses like web audio, Canvas. I think the music notation is Canvas, but it'll show you the web note, like the music notation, and play it for you live. And I believe it works offline. They have a service.
It's made by Adrian Holloway, the Django guy.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
it's really impressive, and as someone who's tried to learn how to play guitar before, I was like, this is awesome. And yeah, check it out. I'll put the link in. Oh, it's already there.
Yeah, I added it. Actually, that's been picked before. I think Igor Minar picked it a couple weeks ago. So yeah, very cool. Ada.
Cool. So I'd like to put in another like reference to SW Toolbox, because now, like, after writing a service worker myself a few times, just there are a lot of edge cases and stuff you don't expect. So SW Toolbox took out a lot of the stress from that. And there's SW Precache. Again, this is in the Google Chrome GitHub repo for generating precaches for your static websites. And finally, Lighthouse, again, come out with the Google Chrome team. Very cool tool. It's not on the. It's a Chrome extension, which is still very early on. So is a little. Like you have to build it yourself and add it to your browser via the add extension, but it will look at your web app manifest and your app and will determine whether it's will give you a list of stuff to check off for being a good progressive web app. It's very, very good. Yeah. So that's my 3 things.
Cool. Thank you. So I'll just wrap things up for the show. So thanks all of you for coming on the show. This has been really interesting. Lots and lots of resources. I recommend you check out the links after the show. So yeah, let me just wrap up with a couple closing announcements. So Trading Technologies is our silver sponsor. They are hiring. Check them out. Suggest.javascriptair.com is a place you can go that will take you to a form where you can suggest shows for us. So yeah, we've done several shows that were suggestions from people, and just like you, and so we appreciate those suggestions. We have a long backlog though, so just be aware of that. But yeah, you can suggest guests or topics, or both. And then feedback.javascriptair.com is a place you can go where you can submit feedback about this show or the show in general or a previous episode. We really value your feedback. And then jsair.io/email will take you to our newsletter where you can see previous weekly newsletters as well as sign up for the newsletter to get an email in your inbox the day after the show every week that gives highlights from the show and the links and tips and picks and stuff. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Next week we're going to be talking about like beginners in the JavaScript community, and so stay tuned for that. I unfortunately will not be hosting that show, but I believe Getify will lead us on that, and it'll be awesome. I will be out of town, so yeah, check us out next week. And as always, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+ to keep up with the latest. And that's our show. So thanks again, everyone, for showing up, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Thank you.